For my final Ed 328 presentation, I decided to choose the case study project presentation. So for my case study project, I worked with a student named Grayson A. She's a student who's in kindergarten at Oriole Lane Elementary, and she's currently in Mrs. Krause's classroom. So Oriole Lane Elementary is a part of the Mequon-Thiensville School District in Mequon, Wisconsin. Grayson is a student who is diagnosed with Down syndrome. She spends majority of her school day in the general education classroom and is covered by her special education department for the services and aids that she needs for 75% of the time while she is in this general education classroom. So during my time with Grayson, I observed her, I interviewed Alicia, her special ed teacher, I instructed her, and I educated her on important information. During this time, I observed Grayson in various settings within the classroom. I observed her participate in reader's workshop, writer's workshop, attend the morning meeting, participate in a reevaluation for math since she had an IEP coming up in the future, as well as I watched her participate in math time and recess time where she interacted with her peers on the playground and was involved in various games and activities within her classmates. So during my time with Grayson, I interviewed her assigned special education teacher, Alyssa Neski, who works daily with Grayson in the classroom during math time as well as reading and writing time. So during my interview with Alicia, I learned that alongside receiving assistance in the classroom, Grayson also receives physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech and language therapy. She attends each therapy session twice weekly, with each session lasting for close to 30 minutes. During this time, I also learned through my interview with Alicia that Grayson really likes to play on the computer as a reward. And in doing this, she's motivated to complete schoolwork, so she gets time to play on the PBS Kids website. So that's one of her rewards when she does something good in school. So she's usually allotted a certain amount of time that she can play on the computer after she's completed an important task. So I instructed Grayson throughout my visits by instructing her how to zip her jacket, since that was one of her goals in her IEP. I used the steps that I wrote in my SIP that I'm showing now. So I created this for instruction for Grayson, basically. And then I also documented observations during my instruction on the assessment form that I'm showing you using the key that is also going to be coming up. I watched her 2 times do this, and I took notes on it 2 times. So it shows her participation and understanding of the steps that I used to instruct her and what was expected of her. So then for the explanation of what I learned and how I grew through this project, so I think that during my time with Grayson at Oriole Lane, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot of useful and valuable information, not only about Grayson as a student or students with disabilities in general, but particularly more about students who have Down syndrome. I learned just how impactful the diagnosis of Down syndrome really is on a student inside the classroom, and how the disability does affect the students in comparison to other students who work alongside them. They definitely have differences in their learning abilities. And I also learned that Down syndrome can seem to be such a vague diagnosis and simple, because I know a lot of people that have been misdiagnosed, or I've heard of stories that there's been misdiagnosis, but in reality there's a lot of different aspects and parts of diagnosing a student with Down syndrome. And I think it's this means that there's a lot of different treatments or accommodations for these students to think about when trying to make these for them in the classroom. So a lot of things are tried to be done on a case-to-case basis, which is important because the teacher needs to know all about each student individually and their preferences. Even if somebody does have the same disability, that doesn't mean that their preferences or anything are the same. So then the reason that I think that this project is important for my audience is because my audience could be potential future special education teachers, and since I'm talking about a student with Down syndrome in my case study, it's important for them to know about the student who has Down syndrome, because maybe they haven't encountered a student with Down syndrome before, and if they're thrown into a job where they have somebody who has Down syndrome on their caseload and they've never dealt with it, they potentially won't know what to do for the student, or specific good accommodations that could help them, or different things in the classroom that could help the student learn better or just be up to their full potential. So it helps them learn about Down syndrome as a whole as well as a specific case. So I also think it could is important for them to know like common accommodations made for students in the classroom and how these common accommodations benefit these students.